Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who may be seeing me for the first time, my name is Amy and I am a true crime YouTuber from Australia. And if you are here joining me for another video, thank you so much for returning. I appreciate you for being here. If you enjoyed this content today, please make sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe. It helps me so much. I appreciate you all being here. Go and grab a coffee, a tea, a snack, whatever tickles your fancy, and let's get into it. Today's case is about Natalee Holloway. Natalee was born October 21st in 1986 in Clinton, Mississippi. However, Natalee was an Alabama girl through and through because that's where her and her family moved when she was a young girl. Natalee was the first of two children, born to Dave and Beth Holloway. Despite being together for quite a few years after starting their family together, they did go their separate ways and ended up divorcing when the kids were still young. In 2000, Beth ended up meeting a guy and they fell so in love. He just fit in with her and the kids and they ended up getting married. His name was George Twitty, but he went by the name Jug. And he was a prominent businessman in Alabama. And it was said that he was very successful, and because of that, he was quite wealthy. He was very much living comfortably. So flash forward and Beth has married the man of her dreams. He fits in well with the family. The kids love him. So they pack up and they move to Alabama to a place called Mountain Brook. And that is where they started their new lives as a family. Friends and family of Natalee have described her as a beautiful soul inside and out. She was a very intelligent individual and actually aspired to become a doctor. She was very kind and always wanted to help others. Natalee also had a lot of friends and she was always involved in hanging out with them and maintaining a strong relationship. She just loved her life and everyone in her life loved her so much. In May 2005, Natalee finished school and she graduated from Mountain Brook High School with honors. She was an exceptional student. She was a member of the National Honor Society, the school dance squad, and even participated in school sports. Natalee had been accepted to attend the University of Alabama on a full scholarship, and this is where she would be able to spread her wings and really become a doctor like she had wished to become. Her life was looking so fruitful and she was just so excited. She could not wait to pursue her undergraduate in medicine and finally become Dr. Holloway. She just knew that that was her life purpose. To celebrate the end of high school, Mountain Brook High sent all 125 graduates, including Natalee, on a trip overseas to Aruba, where they would spend 5 days unwinding and having fun. It was essentially an unofficial graduation trip. It was an all-inclusive package that parents all paid for. So on Thursday, May 26, 2005, all the students were accompanied by 7 adult chaperones, which most of them were parents of the kids on this trip. Everyone was just really excited for this trip. Despite having the chaperones, these chaperones obviously allowed the kids to have some freedom without adult supervision, but you know, they were kids, they were overseas, they were 19, they were able to legally drink, they were just having wild times and really taking advantage of the 5 days they had in Aruba. It was reported that there was a lot of wild drinking, a lot of partying, and it wasn't unusual for people to just swap rooms every night. Like there'd be parties in one room and then that room might go to the other room and people would end up switching beds, and it was just a huge big party where everyone got together, drank, and may have made some silly decisions along the way, but they were teenagers. How fun. It was said that Natalee drank all day, every day. And she liked to start every morning with a cocktail. And it wasn't even unusual for Natalee to sometimes not even make it to breakfast in the hotel because the night before she was just drinking so much that the poor thing would have just been too hungover to get up on time. And yeah, that wasn't unusual, and I'm sure Natalee wasn't the only person that was doing that, but it was reported that Natalee did do it pretty much every morning. It was clear that Natalee was excessively drinking on this trip, but other students did notice her behavior, I guess because maybe the others weren't going to the level that Natalee wanted to be on, and that's totally fine. We all have our own limits, but Natalee was letting her hair down and she looked to be having so much fun, and everyone just knew that she was having so much fun. The night before the trip was over, the class went out to celebrate at a local bar and nightclub. Natalee was seen out that night when she was at a bar and then went to a nightclub called Carlo's and Charlie's. Natalee and some of her classmates got talking to a guy named Joran van der Sloot, and he was accompanied by a couple of his friends who were actually brothers, Deepak and Satish Kelpo, who were 21 and 18 at the time. It was reported that Natalee seemed pretty keen on Joran. She was calling him cute, and she was also telling her friends that she was going to hook up with him at the end of the night. Like, she was really infatuated on him and she thought he was a hottie and she wanted to get some. It was said that Joran was actually spotted out most nights when Natalee and her friends were out at the club. So they just assumed that he was not a local, but another tourist around the same age as them, and he was just having fun with his friends, drinking, and he was actually just really nice as well. Like, he was easy to get along with. So most nights when they would go out, they ended up seeing Joran and his friends, and they would kind of link up and talk naturally every time. So Natalee built up, I guess, a friendship with him. He was a familiar face, and she ended up just, yeah, really liking him. So on their last night in Aruba, they went to Carlo's and Charlie's, and Natalee invited all three of the guys along on a night out with her. The whole night was an absolute blast, and it was reported that not a lot of people actually remembered the night because they were just so drunk. It was their last night. They just wanted to get absolutely just wasted and make the best memories. But they did stay until the bar closed, and I feel like when you know that the bar's closing, you want to go and get food. So that's exactly what they did. They went out to a food cart and they went and got some tacos. Now, at this point, I would imagine that they're starting to sober up a little bit. Once you start getting food in your belly and you're out in the fresh air and not in the flashing lights of the club, you start to kind of realize, okay, yep, I'm so drunk. I'm eating a taco, this is amazing. But one of Natalee's friends noticed in the corner of her eye that Natalee was hopping into a white car with the three guys from the club, Joran and his two mates. But they didn't really think anything of it. They knew that Natalee was really keen on Joran, and it would make sense that she would potentially be going home with him, or he would be going back to her hotel room, and he was with his friends, so it also made sense that they all just went into the one car and eventually ended up where they needed to be. It wasn't suspicious at that time. However, the morning after, Natalee's friends really started to worry about her. And this was because no one had heard from her yet. There was a bus at the hotel ready for the class to hop on to head to the airport, but no one knew where Natalee was. No one really took it too seriously though, because they had a massive night before and she probably just passed out, but it wasn't long until it was actually confirmed that Natalee never came back to the hotel. This is when her friends started to get a weird gut feeling, a bad gut feeling. They didn't think this was right. This wasn't like Natalee. Something just felt off. They quickly started to think to themselves, where did I last see Natalee? Where were we? What happened? And her friends remembered that she went into the white car, Joran's car, with him and his mates. So has something happened to her? Has she just slept in? Is she like gonna regret this majorly when she wakes up because she's missed her bus and potentially her flight? Or has something bad happened? Where is Natalee? Natalee wasn't normally a big party girl, so this type of holiday was new for her, and she and everyone else were drinking heavily, but this just wasn't like her. She was in a different country, and it's not very common to just not catch your bus or flight home, especially when you're still quite young. One of the parents on the trip that was one of the chaperones ended up calling Natalee's family, but they couldn't get a hold of the parents, so they ended up getting a hold of Natalee's brother, Matthew. And then he relayed the message to Natalee's parents that his sister was missing. No one could find her. She didn't show up to the bus, and they just do not know where she is. This really worried Natalee's parents because they know her. They know that she would never be late, especially for something like this. Like, she needs to catch a plane to go home. She's in a different country. It's not just like a suburb away. And they knew something was wrong. So Natalee's mum, Beth, naturally freaked out, and she caught the first flight that she could to Aruba. She needed to find her daughter. When Beth and her husband got to Aruba, she already had information about what happened the night before. Natalee's friends told Beth everything they knew. Upon her arrival, Beth mentioned Joran's name to the front desk of the hotel where Natalee was staying, and they instantly knew who she was talking about. And it's because Duran had a name for himself around the town. It was reported that he liked taking advantage of women, and he was known for just being kind of creepy, and it wasn't unusual for him to be a pest to women. He wanted to pursue them, and he felt like he was gonna get them, and if he didn't, he just didn't like that. He was very much just an overall creep, and the locals knew him instantly. It wasn't unusual for him to take advantage of women on the island, which is so sick. Like, the fact that it was just known that he was like this, and it was just like behavior that was allowed, doesn't sit right with me. But anyways, so from the conversation that she had with people in Aruba, she was able to get Duran's full name and license plate, which is an absolute great start to a missing persons case. Aruba authorities initiated a large search party for Natalee. They searched beaches, towns, venues, anywhere they could search, they searched. During the first days of the missing persons case, the police did have a few suspects in mind, but it's worth noting that they did have two scenarios in their mind when investigating the missing case of Natalee. Did Natalee potentially end up somewhere with her new friends and she was safe, but she maybe just wasn't awake yet or lost track of time? Or was Natalee potentially kidnapped, or did something worse happen to her? Now, Duran and the Kelpo brothers were known around the island, and very well known at the Carlos and Charlie's nightclub. And one of the reasons why they were so well known is because they roofied women regularly, and even taking girls back to their apartment to take advantage of them sexually. And it was even reported that sometimes the three men will take part in gangbangs and naturally invite these women that have potentially been drugged out of their brains to take part. The police soon requested that Duran come into the police station, where they asked him a few questions. Duran said that he did spend time with Natalee, but he dropped her off at the hotel where she was staying, and the Kelpo brothers also confirmed his version of events. According to Duran, once he dropped her at the hotel, he said Natalee fell down as she exited the car, but refused his help when he showed concern. He stated that as he and the brothers were driving away, Natalee was approached by a dark man in a black shirt similar to those worn by security guards. However, due to the hotel where Natalee was staying having surveillance, police knew that this was a lie. Natalee was not seen on any security footage, and hotels are quite secure. Like, most hotels have really good camera angles, and this was one of those hotels. Natalee was not seen coming from any direction back to her hotel room. So not only was there absolutely no proof that Natalee was dropped off, but there definitely was no proof that there was this strange dark man wearing a dark t-shirt that approached Natalee outside the hotel. It was a blatant lie. This didn't happen. As questioning continued, police made note that the men's stories started to change ever so slightly, and there was just no consistency coming from them. Even though Duran said he dropped her off straight away after leaving the club, Duran now stated that they drove Natalee to the California lighthouse in the area of Arashi Beach. And the reason why he dropped her at a lighthouse is because Natalee wanted to see sharks. But instead of staying with Natalee, he said that he just dropped her off at 2 a.m. near this lighthouse to see sharks. That is just like so strange to me. That doesn't even make sense. First of all, it's dark. It's like 2 a.m. at this point. Natalee isn't going to see sharks in the water. And also, most of my male friends would not be leaving me at a lighthouse in a different country at 2 a.m. I just feel like that's not something that a man with morals would actually be comfortable being able to do. If she wanted to be left alone, they could go back to the car and just wait for her. There is no way that this story is plausible. It just doesn't even make sense. Because there was so much back and forth between these three guys, the police ended up just arresting them because they were like, "You lying? Like, what are you trying to hide? Your story keeps changing." However, they were let go because there wasn't enough substantive evidence and they just couldn't keep them any longer. Obviously, the police had some sort of gut feeling at this point that things were just not adding up. It was said that early on in the investigation, when the police were questioning Duran, that they had a theory about what may have happened. The police thought that if this lighthouse story was true or had some truth to it. Perhaps Duran did drive Natalee to the lighthouse, and this is where he maybe made sexual advances toward Natalee, and she said absolutely not, that's not happening, and he became aggressive. Or another theory was that Duran had potentially roofied Natalee. It was part of his ammo. It's something he had done in the past and was known for doing to other women. And I mean, did Natalee have a bad reaction? Was she passed out? Did she hit her head? Did something happen that was just an absolute terrible mistake? Did Duran potentially think that Natalee passing out meant that she had passed away? Did he get rid of her body? Like, they had all of these theories, but nothing really lined up because no one was telling the truth. No one could find Natalee. So the guys said that they dropped Natalee off at a certain spot on the beach, and near this spot there are fishermen huts along the beach. However, there were fishermen on this beach around the time that Duran said that he would have dropped off Natalee. The fishermen had arrived at around midnight, and then they didn't leave until 4:30 a.m. So when these fishermen were questioned, they said there's absolutely no way that anyone was at the beach, especially Natalee. Like, we would have heard people talking between the hours of 12 and 4:30 a.m. It would have been really quiet. You would have just heard the ocean and the noise that the fishermen were making. So that actually sounds really plausible to me. They would have heard people at least coming towards them or talking. One of the fishermen actually said to the police it would have been pretty much impossible for Natalee to be dropped off because they would have heard something, and the only way that they wouldn't have noticed something is if they were deaf and blind. And like, I just love that. I love that this person was like, no, that doesn't make sense. Like you need to investigate further. Like, the girl wasn't here. She wasn't here. But in classic Duran fashion, he constantly changed his story. What was the truth? Was there even any truth in the story? What happened to Natalee? Does he even know anything? Like, what can we believe? What is the purpose of delaying this? Are you delaying it because you did something? Due to the fisherman hut location being mentioned in the investigation, the police actually came across a case that had happened not even 9 days prior to Natalee being reported missing. A woman by the name of Tracy was assaulted in that same location. She was running along the beach where the fishermen huts were, and she noticed a man sitting near one. He was butt naked, and then this man tried to drag Tracy back to the car. She endured an attempted kidnap, and most likely this man was going to harm her by either sexually assaulting her or potentially harming her, killing her. Thank goodness Tracy got away, but when she started seeing missing posters of Natalee, she couldn't help but think, did she fall victim to the same predator that tried to get her on the beach? She did not think that this was a coincidence, so she naturally was like, I need to talk to the police about it, like maybe this will help them. Is it actually possible that there was some truth in Duran's statement? Did he drop her off? And then this man in the fisherman hut grabbed her, and he has Natalee. He's either still got her or she's no longer with us. Is it possible that Natalee was actually dropped off by Duran and someone saw her alone and attacked her like they did Tracy? Now, for me, at this stage in the case, the only thing that's making me think, no, this is not possible, this couldn't have happened, is the fact that these fishermen were at the huts the same time that this attack would have taken place, and they didn't hear anything. They heard nothing, and there was no reason for them to become suspects themselves because they had a pretty genuine alibi. So that's the only reason why I'm like, no, that actually doesn't make sense. But, you know, it's very plausible because Tracy, obviously this happened to her and there was someone in that hut on that day. But for me, I just don't think that that happened to Natalee. This brings me to June 17th, where a guy by the name of Steve C was arrested. Steve C was actually a DJ who went by the name DJ Diablo. He was known for working on cruise boats around Aruba. It had only been a week since Natalee had disappeared, and Steve went to the police and gave them a statement. In his statement, he said that he actually saw Duran and the Kelpo brothers dropping Natalee back to her hotel, but the police knew that this wasn't plausible because there was absolutely no footage found of Natalee. There was nothing. So due to this, they grew suspicious of Steve pretty much instantly. What was he trying to hide by bringing forward this statement of actual lies? Was he trying to protect someone? Was he trying to divert some truth to what had happened? Was he involved? Nothing was lining up. However, when the police asked where Steve was on the night of Natalee's disappearance, he said he was actually booked that night to DJ on a cruise and he fell asleep after his set. So how exactly did he see Natalee being dropped off if he was asleep on a boat? It doesn't line up. But then when the police investigated a little bit further, it was confirmed that he didn't actually DJ that night. He was actually seen out at a club. The people who own Charlie & Co. actually remember seeing Steve there that night. But when confronted with the police findings, Steve, he denied everything. His story didn't line up. He was lying. I don't know what this guy's deal was. Now, during this investigation, Duran's own father became a person of interest in this case. Duran's dad became a piece in the police's theory about what had happened. Now, I know what you're thinking. So far, I've said that the police have quite a few theories, and I know they had a lot of what ifs in their head whilst investigating the disappearance of Natalee. Duran's dad, Paul Vandersloot, was someone that became a person of interest very quickly. They believed that he had ties to the mafia and may know how to get rid of a body if he needed to. This all starting to tie in with their theory that maybe Duran harmed Natalee and got rid of her body, whether it was an accident or not. Police believe that all it would take is a phone call to Duran's dad and Paul would be there straight away. He would know what to do and he would do anything for his son. It's also worth noting that Aruba is an island, which means it is surrounded by water. It would probably be easy to just dump a body in the ocean and it wouldn't be unlikely for it to not be recovered at all. Paul was arrested on June 22nd of 2005. However, on June 26th, he was released and so was Steve C. They just couldn't hold on to them anymore. There was no substantial evidence linking them to Natalee's disappearance at all. They found it really hard linking anyone to Natalee's disappearance. It's July 25th and Natalee has been missing for a while now. Her family are working so close with the Aruba police. They're doing anything in their power to try and find their daughter. They're posting on social media, they're talking to the locals, they're searching every single search party that they're able to attend. They are trying everything and they are just devastated. There is nothing leading them even an inch closer to finding Natalee. They just wanted their daughter home and there was even an award put out for $250,000 in US dollars. But then they soon bumped it up to $1 million US dollars. And this was because they tried to entice anyone to come forward who may know anything, like the tiniest detail. They were happy to just hear anything. They just wanted their daughter home and at this point, alive or dead, they just wanted to know where Natalee was. 18 long months go by and Natalee is still missing. No one has seen her. She just vanished from the island. Now, by now, Natalee's family are back home. They never gave up hope though. They just weren't getting anywhere in Aruba. Resources were drying up and it was just a dead end. To make this situation even more heartbreaking, the Aruba police decided that after 18 months of searching for Natalee, that they were going to close this case. When Beth heard this news, she obviously was devastated. The only hope of finding her daughter in Aruba is now completely gone. The Aruba police actually faced a lot of criticism over this case. At the start of it all, Beth pretty much led the investigation, and it was because the local police were useless. And yes, they did launch a search party, but that's pretty much all they did. And to be honest, that's the bare minimum when you have someone that's gone missing. They had the attitude throughout the whole investigation that Natalee was just sleeping somewhere. She partied too hard the night before and she's passed out at some friend's house. But it might run deeper than that. The interest or the lack of interest that the police have in Aruba could be linked to something more evil. So Paul, Duran's dad, actually had a really good relationship with the local police, and this was because, one, he was a very powerful and well-known man in Aruba, and two, he was a judge in training. So he obviously mingled with the right people. However, the most surprising thing to me is that Duran is the godson of the police chief of Aruba. I mean, that doesn't sound like a conspiracy theory to me. That sounds like a cover-up. Also, aside from that, no one actually really investigated the three men. Duran and the two brothers were consistently changing their stories. They were obviously trying to hide something, and no one in the Aruban police tried to get down to the nitty-gritty of it. No one really cared. They essentially took their lies as truth and they let the case fizzle out to the point that they closed it. Now, Duran is obviously stoked that this case is closed. The pressure is off him. He's no longer a suspect. And due to the amount of media attention that this attracted, he was essentially able to make appearances for interviews because he was no longer a suspect in a missing persons case. And he thought that this was perfect timing to tell his side of the story. The media, doing what they do best, they were offering a payment to anyone who would talk about Duran. But Duran contacted Fox News himself. He said that he would be keen to talk about everything, and he was given $25,000 US. Now, I do encourage you to go and listen to that full interview. Literally none of it makes sense. He makes some pretty ludicrous comments throughout the whole interview. One being that a stranger offered to pay Duran $10,000 if he could find him a blonde girl, as if it was some weird black market trade. So when this interview was done, they had interviewed Duran and got his side of the story. I'd imagine they'd taken it to the editing room. They were getting ready to set it up for a live airing. And then Duran texted his contact at Fox News and basically said, sorry, everything I told you was a lie. None of it was the truth. I just wanted to get paid. However, Fox News released the interview anyways, because essentially they thought that it would just prove how twisted Duran really is. If this situation alone doesn't prove to you how twisted and how evil he is, then I don't really know what else to say. There is a girl missing and he thinks that this is a joke. Like, okay, what a piece of shit. I actually really like that Fox News released the interview and then made it a separate story to kind of explain how much of an evil person Duran is, because the public weren't falling for it anymore. They knew that this guy was responsible and he was just slimy and evil, and he just knew how to get out of the grip of people's hands. He knew how to get what he wanted, and I have a lot of hate for this person. I do not like this person. He gives me the heebie-jeebies, and this case just makes me feel so sad for Natalee. Now, a huge plot twist in this case. It was discovered that Duran was part of the sex trafficking industry in Thailand, and he went by the name of Murphy Jenkins. He would ultimately get $13,000 each time he lured in poor women by selling them lies about a lucrative lifestyle that they would be able to have if they went with him. Did he potentially have these same connections in Aruba? It's not unheard of that the police in Thailand are very corrupt. Is it possible that someone in Thailand knew someone in Aruba? Was Duran the middle person? Is this where Natalee is? Has she been trafficked? I mean, that would potentially make sense, right? Because no one knows where she is. She's literally vanished. Based on this part of the story alone, this is why I love true crime communities, because this is something that was investigated by people that were just digging deep into the case. This wasn't general knowledge that the police found. This was literally, it just came out of the woodwork because people investigated, and I love that. I love that there's power in people when it comes to men and women that are this evil. So after all of this media attention and Duran telling all of these lies, taking all of this money for interviews, and just painting Natalee and her family in this light of like, I have no care for them, no respect for them, and they had to watch this person just talk shit. Like, So after all of this media attention and Duran being paid to tell lies time after time, the case was actually reopened in February of 2008. And it was reopened because there was fire back in the case. They wanted to get Natalee home. They wanted to try and find her. But it wasn't until 2 years later, in 2010, when Paul Vandersloot was believed to know more about Natalee's disappearance and what he let on. But he actually passed away in 2010 when he was playing a game of tennis. And Duran, being the amazing human and son that he is, he took this opportunity to talk to the media again and just became even more cocky, to the point that he actually contacted Beth, Natalee's mum, 2 weeks later, and he basically said to Beth, I know where you can find Natalee's body and you need to pay me $250,000 and then I'll tell you. Now, Beth is not a stupid person. She knew that Duran was just being a psychopath and he was trying to toy with her about her missing daughter. Beth told authorities what happened and the FBI got involved, but Duran wouldn't talk unless he was given $25,000 from the FBI, which he was ultimately given. And I don't really know why they just gave it to him, but I guess ultimately it's a small price to pay to potentially find Natalee's body or find Natalee alive. So once he received the money, Duran told the FBI with his legal team in the room with him that Natalee's body was buried under his late father's house, which at the time of Duran meeting Natalee, this house was under construction. However, this was a big fat lie and the FBI were pissed. They were so mad. They essentially discovered that the house was never under construction and now they wanted to get Duran on extortion, but they were too bloody late. Duran left the country. It was too late to get him. He's gone, and I don't know why they didn't jump on him when they had him. It's so frustrating. Like, I feel like Duran is just wiggling out of every single scenario and he's just not ever gonna get caught. So he ended up flying to Peru, where he basically just spent his time gambling. And he was gambling all of the money that he was paid for the interviews that he was doing when he spoke about Natalee. So he ends up being AWOL for 5 years. No one has heard from him and no one really has him on their radar anymore. Like, it's just, again, the case has just gone dead. There's nothing else to really do. But that's until he met a girl by the name of Stephanie Flores. Now, I won't go into the details of Stephanie's case here because she deserves her own video. She deserves to be spoken about separate to Natalee's case, but I will be uploading part 2 next week, so make sure that you are subscribed to this channel to get the next part of this video. This will be part 1, Stephanie Flores will be part 2, and they are very much connected. Now, all this time has passed and Natalee's dad just wants closure at this point. He petitioned for Natalee to be legally declared deceased. I would imagine that you would most likely get to this point once it's been a few years. There's nothing to suggest that Natalee is alive anymore, and I guess this is the only way that her family can control an aspect of this case, and it's to get some sort of closure about their daughter. But aside from that, there was actually a lot of money held up in her college fund, and they thought that it would be a really good idea to pass that money over to Matthew, Natalee's younger brother, and to be completely honest with you, that makes sense. And I hope that her brother got the education that he deserved despite all the horrible things that were happening in his and his family's life. Now, there has actually been an update just as recent as late last year. Part of Duran's plea deal, there was actually a requirement that he had to confess and tell the truth about how he harmed Natalee. He admitted to bludgeoning her to death, and he used a concrete block and hit her across the head, and it was because she declined his sexual advances. He then let her body drift away into the ocean. He left, wanted to go back home, and once he got home, settled in, went to bed. He got comfy and he told everyone that he decided that he was gonna watch porn. How lovely. Natalee's mum was actually able to listen into Duran's confession in true time, and I cannot even imagine what she was thinking as she was hearing Duran confess to these vile things. And even though this was part of his plea deal, I do not know what to believe. I mean, it seems plausible, right? But he's lied throughout this whole case. He's lied for many, many years. He's lied to police, to the media, to Natalee's own family. I would love to hear your opinions down below in the comment section. This type of case, when there's so many lies and there's just no black and white answer, there is a lot of room for speculation about what happened. I do think he bludgeoned her to death with a brick. That doesn't shock me. I feel like that is a very plausible thing that happened. His ego was hurt. She said no, and he didn't think that that was okay. As I mentioned before, there will be a part 2 following on from today's video. Part 2 will include more information about this case. It makes more sense to pop it into the Stephanie Flores video because it ties more into the timeline of what happened with her. It also will dig deeper into Duran and the heinous crimes that he committed. I hope you tune in to listen to Stephanie's case. As always, thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. Until next time, have a good one wherever you are. I'll see you later. Bye.